Let's get right into this review for Moana 2. So Moana 2 is the official sequel to the original film, which came out back in 2016. The first film was a tremendous success and it was considered one of the best original animations at the time. Now it's been a long while since the first film debuted and many people are anticipating whether the sequel would live up to the same hype and expectations set forth by its predecessor. And before I give an answer to the question of whether the sequel was worth it in 2024, I want to first talk about the positives of this film. First off, I thought the voice casting here was great, just like the original. Everyone nailed their respective roles here during both the dialogue and musical segments. So no problems with the voice casting here. Now the best part of this film for me was probably the animation. The clarity and fluidity of so many sequences that you get here out in the vibrant seas felt crisp, and I found myself being in awe with several animation sequences here. Lastly, the general music that was created for the sequel was pretty solid. It wasn't anything superb or something that I remember in a catchy way after my screening, but I found it to be good for the story presentation here. Now to get into the big question, was the sequel worth the wait? My answer to that question is both yes and no. I think this sequel still passes the bare-bone requirements for a decent time, especially if you want a family night out at the theaters or are die-hard fans of this Moana universe and aren't setting up too big of an expectation for the sequel to top the original. But I also do think Moana would have been fine off without a sequel because the second story felt generic and mediocre at best. And to get into the rest of the cons I had with this film, there are several lackluster side characters that awkwardly fit into the narrative picture here and don't really add much to the overall story. They just felt incredibly forced onto the story for the sake of creating more companions to follow Moana on her journey. Secondly, some of the pivotal story elements here felt weak and aren't ever explained well enough to build any real intrigue for the continued lore. Therefore, I found myself feeling bored at times with how overly simple and predictable the entire narrative package was. Ultimately, I think my biggest problem with this film is similar to what I felt when watching Frozen 2. Both the original Frozen and Moana were incredibly iconic stories that many people fell in love with. There was a magic to these films that brought people to the theaters and iconic catchy songs that people enjoyed with the visuals. But then comes the unnecessary sequels for each respective story, in which I started to lose some of that magical vibes I felt from the originals and found it generally to be much weaker in all story aspects, whether it's the song, character developments, or originality and uniqueness to the narrative package. There's just way too many visible elements that are far superior with the first film that overshadow the sequels and makes them feel mediocre at best. My final score for Moana 2 is 7 out of 10. It's okay. Definitely not better than the first, and if a third film is ever created, I'd be more cautiously skeptical rather than optimistic about how good it'll turn out to be. But yeah, this film can still be an enjoyable time as long as you're fine with the formulaic, safe-playing narratives most family-friendly animations typically tend to follow. Anyways, thanks for checking this review out. Seems like movie releases are slowing down during the next week or so, but you'll definitely see another review on this channel again soon. It's only a matter of time. But until then, peace.